Many of us remember Office Space, one of the most cathartic comedies that accurately showcases the meaningless, abusive, manipulative state of contemporary work. It's supposed to be funny, lighthearted attempts to elaborate on the absurd nature of it. But over 20 years later, the joke hasn't ended. What if Office Space is more akin to a documentary about spectral capitalism, about dead labor, about the new, slow, cold exorcism of meaning from our working lives? I want to start this video not with theory, but a visual. You show up to work, or log in from home. You speak the language. You attend the meeting. You nod, you smile, but beneath it all, there's that flicker, the sense that this whole thing is hollow. There's a particular silence to today's workplace. Not quiet, but silence. Something that creeps in through the Zoom call where half the cameras are off. Through Slack messages written in perfect grammar and perfect fear. Through the hollow echo of a company town hall where someone says, "We're a family," and nobody believes them. We're taught to accept this abusive weirdness as normal, to participate in this collective hallucination that what we're doing is meaningful, productive, necessary. But in quiet moments, riding the elevator alone, staring at your reflection in a bathroom mirror, walking to your car at 8 p.m. after another day that felt simultaneously exhausting and empty, the illusion starts to flicker. You catch a glimpse of what's really happening. We're haunting these spaces as much as they're haunting us. You're not working, you're haunting the workflow, and the workflow is haunting you. During the pandemic, Microsoft reported that 40% of remote workers kept their cameras off during meetings, present but invisible. When offices reopened in 2022, many described a profound sense of disorientation. One JP Morgan employee called it walking through a museum of how we used to work. Plants were dead, calendars frozen in March 2020, personal items untouched for years like artifacts from a vanished civilization. The place was a literal time capsule, perfectly preserved like Pompeii after Mount Vesuvius exploded. But unlike Pompeii, we were expected to simply reoccupy these ruins and carry on as if nothing had changed, to reanimate the corporate corpse. What is fascinating to me is that this phenomenon isn't merely burnout, nor alienation in traditional conceptual senses, seen in someone like Hahn or Marx. It's reamalgamations of something genuinely new, mixed in with old philosophical concepts that have come back to life. To understand what's happening with work, we need to talk about Marx, Derrida, Fisher, and even you in your own experiences. Like many things, Marx has a phrase that predates this phenomenon, that being dead labor. Labor that once lived, solidified now in code, in systems, and expectations from executives and middle management. Marx famously stated, "Capital is dead labor," that vampire-like only lives by sucking living labor, and lives the more labor it sucks. The time during which the laborer works is the time during which the capitalist consumes the labor power he has purchased of him. This works not only materially, but even phenomenologically, with our senses. When you open your email, you're not answering a person, you're responding to a workflow that predates you, a fossilized directive, a ghost. This is also material. You don't really produce anymore. You render, you show up, you log hours, you remain visible, a part of the necrotic religion that is the office. Your work week is defined by a 40 to 50 hours, but you might only produce 15 hours within it. For Marx, dead labor wasn't just metaphorical. It was the literal accumulation of past human effort congealed into tools, machines, and systems owned by capitalists that then control living workers. In the 19th century factory, dead labor manifested as machinery that dictated the pace and form of production. Today, it's algorithms, management frameworks, KPI dashboards, digital architectures that control us while appearing neutral and inevitable. owned and pillaged by a select few, with workers keeping the ghosts alive. Think about it. When Amazon's algorithm tracks warehouse workers, time off task, down to the second, it's the dead labor of programmers and managers controlling the living labor of human bodies. When your performance review template forces you to quantify your value in standardized metrics, it's dead labor dictating the terms on which your living labor will be judged. If the basis of so much contemporary labor is best visualized in Marx's conception of dead labor, what's another decent way we could describe our current era of late-stage or postmodern capitalism? I really like the language of spectral capitalism. In a similar language to Derrida's Spectres of Marx, Derrida's idea that even amidst the fall of the Soviet Union, we can never escape the specter of Marx. His critiques that are just as visual will continue to haunt Europe and the West. Derrida noted the arrogance of many of liberal democracy's defenders and the new neoliberal movement that solidified the West. Francis Fukuyama's idea that not only did capitalism win, but it permanently ended all other ideologies, ushering in what Fukuyama famously called the end of history. Derrida has a theoretical issue with this. Fukuyama uses Hegel to describe liberal democracy as a type of realized absolute spirit, the end stage of a socio-political dialectic. Yet, no dialectic has ever really been in place to Derrida. In order for that to happen, there needs to be an honest contention with both systems, communism and capitalism. That never happened. In more simple and visual terms, Derrida saw that all the same issues within capitalism not only persisted but intensified: wealth inequality, poverty, capitalism's classic contradictions that have existed for centuries, arguing for protectionist or free trade economic policies, the deportation of immigrants, or integration of them. Despite what seemed to be the end of communism, the ones celebrating it had yet to reckon with situations that led to the Bengali famine, the political persecution and execution of millions of left-wing activists, labor organizers in 1960s Singapore, to thousands of the same in 1970s Chile. In Derrida's eyes, the capitalism that exists lays upon the ghost that we're never contended with. In a prior video, we also highlighted how Mark Fisher took this idea further. We aren't just haunted by the past, but by the future and present we never had. The meaningful careers, the expansion of individual freedom and liberty, the 15-hour work weeks with the massive increase in production. In a society that kneecaps education, we further see that people often lack the language to explain their alienation, their core feelings of day-to-day life. What left is there other than the feeling of hauntedness? Something in the peripheral that isn't right. Something that isn't gone, but is making its appearance in ways we don't truly understand. In a time where productivity is at record levels, real estate at record prices, why do executives demand workers return to the office? The theorist Wendy Brown offers us interesting parallels to the decaying workplace, as to the decay in capitalism's stability. In her book, Walled States, Waning Sovereignty, she asserts that in the years after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the ushering of neoliberalism, globalism, and international trade, market forces have eroded the domestic power of the traditional system, traditional state authority. Thus, we see the explosion of walls, specifically prisons, border security, gated communities, walls themselves. But these new systems are a symbolic reaction to restore order. It's merely an exercise of symbolic power, as the walls themselves don't really work. In an almost prophetic lens, Wendy Brown wrote this in 2010, 6 years before Trump's first term. We can apply the same logic to executives who want to exercise the same autocratic oversight of their employees. Executives and certain management need to justify their existence amidst the decay of the office workplace. It's not about collaboration, nor productivity, or cost. It's about control, visibility, reminding workers who owns the architecture of presence, and who most of all owns your labor and you yourself. You are the puppet, they are the puppeteer. You are the slave, they are your master. You are the serf, they are the king. Consider the absolute absurdity of empty office buildings maintained at enormous expenses during the pandemic. Companies paid millions in rent for vacant space while their employees worked effectively from home. Even now, many office buildings remain half empty as hybrid work becomes the norm. Yet companies still cling to these physical structures. Why? Well, it's intentional. There's deliberate underutilization of our productive potential. We have the technological capacity to work less, to work differently, to organize production around human flourishing rather than profit extraction. But that would threaten the existing power structures, existing ownership models, existing hierarchies. It's like we built the material basis for a different, better world, but then deliberately chose not to use it. In the vein of Mark Fisher, these possibilities remain spectral, haunting our present as unrealized futures. We can sense their potential presence, but they're kept from materializing by the inertia of existing power arrangements. When Apple CEO Tim Cook demanded workers return to offices, calling remote collaboration a challenge despite 2 years of record profits during remote work, he wasn't expressing a genuine productivity concern. When your CEO wants you back in your cubicle, they're not summoning your labor, they're summoning your obedience. There's something futile about this insistence on seeing bodies in seats, on maintaining the ritual of workplace presence even when unnecessary. It's not about results, but about power, about maintaining the visible hierarchies that remind everyone who's in charge. And this brings us back to the core question. If so much of what we do has become performance, what are we actually producing? Where is the value coming from? Corporate stock has never been higher, yet many companies don't even turn a profit. Value itself has lost its material referent. Value is now spectral, a type of ghost. In the 19th century, the exploitation was brutally visible. Workers' bodies visibly breaking down in the factories, their labor directly producing physical goods. The connection between work and value was much more clear, even if the distribution was unjust. Today, exploitation operates through spectral mechanisms: stress, anxiety, the demand to always be on, always visible, always performing engagement. The extraction happens at the level of attention, affect, emotional labor. Think about the countless hours we spend in pointless meetings, writing reports no one reads, creating presentations that change nothing, responding to emails that could have been avoided entirely. This isn't productive labor in any meaningful sense. It's ritual. It's performance. It's the maintenance of organizational ghosts. And I think this is deliberate. The haunting is the point. The spectral quality of contemporary work obscures the extraction of value, making resistance difficult because the chains are invisible. How do you organize against invisible exploitation? How do you strike against labor demands that produce nothing? When your oppressor is an algorithm, an HR department, or a dispersed network, rather than a visible boss, where do you direct your resistance? And we wonder why corporate and tech workers rarely unionize. Perhaps the most pervasive aspect of this system is how it turns workers against themselves and each other. In this spectral capitalism, we become our own exploiters. We answer emails at 11 p.m. not because someone would explicitly demand it, but because of internalized expectations. We work through illness not necessarily because we'll be fired, but because we've absorbed the idea that commitment means sacrifice. We judge colleagues who maintain boundaries as less dedicated, less professional, less worthy of advancement. The real genius of spectral capitalism is making exploitation feel like a choice. The chains are invisible because we've internalized them. We haunt ourselves. Yet, there are ways out of this. The first, I think, is recognition, recognizing the pervasive hauntedness around us. There's power in calling bullshit what it is. When a meeting has no purpose, when an email chain is performative, and when your work crosses boundaries, acknowledge them as such with your peers. Abuse thrives in ambiguity. We need to be honest about the idea that the office is already dead. It's been dead. And it also shows the transparent, necrotic essence in 21st century capitalism. Executives whose job it is to increase stock prices, shareholder value, are showing the one thing they will never give up, that being power. Office real estate is expensive. The infrastructure needed to accomplish a work environment of cubicles, computers, staff is incredibly expensive. What better way to increase value and offset expenses than to completely decentralize your corporate organization? Instead, they would rather lay people off. They would rather do this because this allows them to exercise their power. There's a huge reason psychological research has found that there is an exponential increase in psychopaths represented higher up a corporation you go. And how, in some estimations, 1 in 5 corporate executives could be sociopaths, with more tame estimations predicting around 12%. COVID did accomplish one thing, that being the capacity for a better and different world is already here. Things like 4-day work weeks, remote flexibility, universal basic income are and should be considered extreme compromises at most. In actuality, we deserve much more than that. Worker movements today aren't just asking for better pay and technicalities. We could argue they are trying to exorcise this dead labor to reclaim lost time, to change our approach, to disentangle meaning from raw metrics and short-term profits. From Mark Fisher to Derrida's points, the hauntedness we feel are symptoms of a system reaching its limits, exhausting its capacity to maintain the fiction of its own necessity. The question is, will we collectively organize, consciously live our lives such that we can usher in the more democratic, equal, and just future we all deserve? Thank you all for watching and making it to the end. These videos would be impossible without the support of all the kind people over on Patreon and the Epoch Philosophy website. With that, I have a huge request. If these videos offer tangible value to you, consider pledging just a few dollars a month. We offer some cool bonus perks, and most of all, we can keep these videos free for everyone. Before we go, I want to give an extra large shout out to these patrons in particular, Cedric Watman and Jay Roberts. You guys have truly gone above and beyond, and I cannot thank you enough. For everyone else, I hope to see you in the next.